And so I directly would like to go to the next panel, which on the one hand will be Senator Ben Cardin from the USA. He's online and already with us. He is a senior ranking member of the American Senate, member of the Foreign Relations Committee, the Subcommittee on the Western Hemisphere, transnational crime, civilian security, democracy, human rights, and global women's issues. And we are very happy to have you with us, and the floor is yours, please.
Petra, first of all, thank you very much for that kind introduction, but more importantly, thank you for the invitation to participate in this parliamentary discussion. The Parliamentarians for Global Action, I very much admire your priorities in dealing with some of the major issues of our time. I'm sorry I can't be in Buenos Aires. I was there last week with a group of senators who were visiting Argentina. We also went to Ecuador and Colombia. We had good meetings with the leadership in those three countries, and I can assure you we did bring up the issues of human rights and justice. We used that opportunity. We also used it as a preview to COP27, which I will be in Egypt next week with a U.S. delegation. So thank you for this forum. The subject matter for this particular session is extremely important. The paralysis of the United Nations Security Council in the face of atrocity crimes and the failure of the international community. What can lawmakers do for atrocity prevention and accountability? Well, the first thing we need to do is acknowledge the current situation, which is not good at all. We see a growing number of human rights violations around the world, democratic backsliding, and creeping authoritarianism, which has led to more vulnerable situations for atrocities, unfortunately some leading to genocide. Genocide Watch, a nonpartisan group, has identified 11 countries that are in danger of committing genocide, from Mali to Venezuela. We also know of many, many other countries in which atrocities are taking place on a regular basis. And obviously, front and center has been Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the violations that they have committed and the atrocities that they have committed. So we know that the United Nations Security Council in recent years has been challenged by gridlock and has been ineffective in dealing with these atrocities. That underscores the importance of parliamentarians taking action here. We can act in our parliaments, so we can deliver, and we can speak without the restraints of diplomats. And that puts us in a very important position to do something about atrocity prevention. We can act. And to give you just one example, in 2019, the United States Congress passed the Elie Wiesel Genocide and Atrocities Prevention Act. This act set as a priority for U.S. foreign policy prevention diplomacy. We authorized training of our diplomats to deal with how to identify circumstances in a country that could lead to atrocities or genocide, and to take preventive actions to prevent those circumstances from happening. We require transparency, so there's a good deal of information that's made available, openly made available, with reports to Congress and the public. Our goal is to recognize that we need to take active steps in countries that have hotspots so that they don't turn into a genocide. Atrocity prevention is our goal. And this legislation, I think, has been a very important tool in the United States toolkit to deal with atrocity prevention. Let me just give you another example where parliamentarians need to play a critical role. I chair the U.S. Helsinki Commission. The U.S. Helsinki Commission is our participating arm in the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe and the Parliamentary Assembly, which is part of that. In that role, I've held hearings on the conflict in Ukraine. And yes, we need to support Ukraine. We need to provide the defensive weapons that they need. We need to make sure they have everything they can to help with the humanitarian crisis that's taking place. We've got to deal with the displaced people, both within and out of Ukraine. But what we can do as parliamentarians is to set the bar for what is the outcome in Ukraine. And a successful outcome in Ukraine demands that Ukraine have its territorial integrity in place. That's critically important. Russian troops must leave. But there also needs to be accountability for the atrocities that have been committed in Ukraine. And we have spoken up about that. I had a hearing before the Helsinki Commission where we identified that all of the indications of genocide have taken place by Russia and Ukraine. And there needs to be accountability for those who perpetrated those actions. Parliamentarians can speak about that. Again, we are not restrained as diplomats. We can speak our mind and speak truth. Parliamentarians act stronger when we act collectively. And that's why I am very proud of the role that the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe's Parliamentary Assembly plays in developing critical policy that is so important. I'll give you just one example. In the context of the Helsinki Commission and as part of the work of the Parliamentary Assembly, I introduced legislation, bipartisan legislation I might add, to create a global Magnitsky Human Rights Accountability Act. I think most of you are aware of Sergei Magnitsky, a lawyer in Russia that was representing a client, found corruption, reported that corruption. He was arrested by the Russian authorities for reporting corruption. He was tortured and killed in prison. We established the Magnitsky statute to go after those human rights violators that are not held accountable within their own country. And we did that by naming them and then doing something that we knew would really hurt and act as a deterrent for others. We know that these human rights violators, those who perpetrate these atrocities, want to be able to keep their assets in other countries, and they want to be able to visit other countries. So the penalty on the Magnitsky sanctions are individual to that perpetrator, denying them the right for visas and to use our banking system. And it's been very, very effective in dealing with putting a spotlight on those who contribute to a country or a leader committing atrocities against its population. It's been effective in the United States since 2017. We have issued 400 individuals have been sanctioned in over 40 countries. And as a result of U.S. congressional action, we've had 6 other countries that have passed similar statutes, including the UK and Canada, and the European Union recently passed a Magnitsky-type sanction bill. So, just points out the reason this gained a lot of interest is that we brought this up within the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly. We got parliamentarians, including my friends from Canada and UK, to be able to get this not just in the United States, but in other countries around the world. Senator Krickel and I are pushing very hard to establish a parliamentary assembly within the Organization for American States. In our view, the Organization of American States is not living up to its full potential. And part of that is the lack of parliamentary participation and action. As I said, by acting in our parliaments and by speaking out without the restraints of some of our diplomats. Senator Wicker, Republican, who is my counterpart, I'm a Democrat in the Senate on the Helsinki Commission, introduced legislation that was passed by the United States Congress that instructed our mission at the OAS to start a process for a parliamentary dimension. I'm pleased that at the ministerial meeting just recently, a resolution was passed to implement a parliamentary participation within the OAS. I urge all of you to help us to strengthen the OAS. Those of you that deal with your missions at OAS, to make sure we implement our formal role within OAS, which I think can make OAS a much more effective tool in dealing with atrocity prevention and to prevent genocides from taking place. We need your help to make that a reality. Our responsibilities as parliamentarians, at the most basic level, in supporting legislation and strengthening institutions that uphold the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights that proclaims all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. We have a responsibility within our own country to make sure we respect every citizen's ability to practice freedom of speech, worship, and assembly. These are things in which we can lead as parliamentarians, and I thank you for this opportunity so that we can try to develop a joint strategy on how we can accomplish the mission of a safer world. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Senator Cardin, for sharing these very concrete examples. And I just would like to combine this maybe with something Minou mentioned earlier, and which is maybe an umbrella over all of that. We are accountable for victims of the past and of the future. And I think all the examples you stressed enshrine that thought. Without any further delay, I would like to hand over to my colleague from Canada, Ali Elhassi. He will give some comments on what just was said. Please, Ali.
Thank you very much, Petra. I should say it's a challenge following in the footsteps of Senator Cardin, who was very gracious in explaining some of the things that the United States has been doing with respect to atrocity crimes. And as was noted, we are currently, I'm sure we're all fully aware of this, living in a world where it is awash in various countries committing atrocity crimes. As was suggested, we are now talking about 13 countries where allegations of mass-scale atrocities are said to exist. Now, if I could, given that much of the attention nowadays is focused on Ukraine and the reality that those institutions that we have all expected to see play a more prominent role have not necessarily been able to do so, allow me to speak about some of the things that members of Parliament have been doing with respect to Ukraine. Now, just for those of you who may not be familiar, what is occurring in Ukraine has really pulled on every Canadian's heartstring. And that is by virtue of the fact that 1.2 million Canadians are of Ukrainian heritage. So this is one of those issues, one of those very few issues where there are absolutely no partisan differences within our Parliament. I've been there for 7 years now, and I could truly say this is the one issue where every party is committed to seeing our country and our government do as much as we possibly can. So far, the assistance has been comprised of providing military armaments. It has been of imposing sanctions. To date, the Government of Canada has imposed over 1,500 sanctions on Russian entities and Russian nationals. We have also instituted a new program in terms of welcoming Ukrainians. Obviously, we have not taken in the numbers that we have seen in Eastern Europe. But for the first time, we actually have attempted to bring in a whole new stream of immigration, whereby people who are coming from Ukraine are immediately provided the right to work. And to date, 100,000 Ukrainians have arrived in Canada. In addition to that, much like many of your respective countries, there has been financial assistance. There has been financial assistance bilaterally to the Ukrainian government itself, but also to multilateral institutions that are doing tremendous work in the region, assisting with all of the complications that Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine has left us all trying to contend with. Now, in addition to that, to be more specific about atrocity crimes, we certainly understand full well how important it is that in this particular instance, the Russian government be held to account. I am one of the few Canadians who has had the privilege of being in Ukraine, being in Kyiv, after the war started. And of all the things I saw, all the atrocities that I was a witness to, that obviously deeply shakens anyone who has the opportunity to see it. But the remarkable thing was, when speaking to the Minister of Justice in Ukraine, when speaking to numerous officials, was that despite all the hardships that have been visited upon Ukraine and the government of Ukraine and the Parliament of Ukraine, one thing they have been doing systematically is collecting evidence. They have over 100 different teams which are looking into various aspects of atrocity crimes being committed by Russia, because they want to ensure that this specific evidence one day is taken to court and that Russia is held to account. Now, we have seen numerous global efforts. Several months ago, there was an initiative whereby the US, the United Kingdom, and the EU actually teamed together to assist the government of Ukraine do so. We have also, Canada has also provided expertise. And one of the things we're doing, and this is something that we had never previously done, is as Ukrainians do come to Canada, we have instructed officials who welcome them to make sure that they do inquire of those individuals, whether they were witnesses to atrocity crimes, so that we in turn can also assist with providing evidence, not only evidence which currently exists in Ukraine, but also evidence that could very well be within the remit of individuals who are coming to Canada. And that is something that I think all countries should be doing. Now, I was told that in addition to providing some semblance of an update as to what Canada is doing, that I also have the opportunity to ask Senator Cardin a question as well. And my question was, when we do live in an age where authority is fragmented, when all of us are concerned that our international institutions are not operating with unity and with the seriousness that we all like to see, what are some of those challenges? Because, of course, our various countries have each tried to assist as atrocity crimes do occur. However, when you know that those multilateral institutions that are on the front lines, for whatever reason, are unable or impeded from doing what it is that we all expect them to do, what are the solutions? Are the solutions that various groupings do things independently? For example, the Senator did talk about the Organization of American States. But surely, if we do continue to do it in such a balkanized manner, whether it be the G7 countries doing certain things, the OAS or other institutions, how does that undermine our ability to actually hold the biggest violators of international norms and those who impede the development of international law to account, Senator? I was wondering, given your many years of experience and the insights that you shared with us, whether you would care to comment on that. Thank you.
Well, thanks for that, for the question, but more importantly, thanks for your presentation. I think you almost gave your own answer, and that is the response in regards to Russia's invasion of Ukraine has been unified globally. More unity than we've ever seen. Do we have the total support of the international organizations? Not as much as we would like, although the vote in the United Nations General Assembly was certainly overwhelming. So we do have a model to follow. And quite frankly, you really indicated why we were successful in Ukraine with international unity. And that in Canada and the United States, it was never a partisan issue. Democrats and Republicans don't agree on a lot in the United States, but we agreed on Ukraine. And the same thing was in Canada with your different parties. So we also developed the strategy. The strategy was, as you said, make sure that Ukraine has what it needs, provide humanitarian assistance, impose sanctions against Russia, but just as importantly, document the atrocities and make it clear that no settlement of this conflict can be done unless there is accountability for those who've committed the atrocities. So yes, we need to strengthen the international organizations. That's why I say OAS is, in my view, not performing at its potential. I look at the OSCE and I see a stronger organization. Both are regional, but I think the OSCE is a stronger organization. It's been very successful in its mission, in its country missions. Its election monitoring has been very effective. And where we can get those missions in country, it has prevented hotspots from turning into genocides. So let's strengthen those organizations. And then let's do what we've done in so many of the challenges globally. Let's share best practices and put a spotlight on it and help each other. Because quite frankly, Canada has done some really great things. We should highlight that and then copy it, and that's what legislators can do. So you're absolutely correct. The organizational structure of the United Nations Security Council or the United Nations Human Rights Council is not going to allow us to be able to utilize those institutional groups to avoid certain atrocities. But what we can do is try to strengthen these organizations and then lead by example and get coalition building that can bring about effective action.